Darwin Awards aren't given to the brightest among us. They're awarded posthumously to those who remove themselves from the gene pool in the dumbest ways possible. From reckless stunts to fatal misjudgments, these deaths are tragically stupid and 100% real. Prepare for an hour of jaw-dropping decisions that will have you shaking your head in disbelief. This is 1 hour of tragically stupid deaths of all time. July 9, 1993, in Toronto, Canada. Gary Hoy, a 38-year-old lawyer, was preparing for a special event. His law firm, Holden Day Wilson, was hosting a reception for students interested in internships. The gathering took place on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower, a high-rise in the city's financial district. Gary, a respected corporate lawyer, was excited to meet the students and give them a tour of the office. However, what started as a normal day became a tragedy that would be remembered for years. Gary wasn't just known for his legal expertise. He had a reputation for an unusual stunt. He would run into the office windows to show their strength, bouncing off to prove they wouldn't break. Over the years, Gary had done this countless times without any issues. His colleagues and visitors often found it amusing, and Gary took pride in pulling off the demonstration. That day, Gary decided to show the trick again to the students. Confident as always, he threw himself at the window, and just like before, the glass held and he bounced back. But for reasons unknown, Gary wasn't satisfied and decided to do it again. This time, things went wrong. Instead of bouncing off like before, the window gave way. It didn't shatter, but it popped out of its frame, sending Gary falling 24 stories to his death in the courtyard below. He died instantly from the impact. The students and colleagues who witnessed the accident were shocked. What was supposed to be a simple demonstration had turned into a fatal accident in a matter of seconds. Emergency services arrived quickly, but they could do nothing to save Gary. His death left everyone in disbelief. Authorities and engineers were called to investigate. The glass itself hadn't broken. It had simply come out of its frame. Structural engineer Bob Greer later explained that no window frame could withstand the repeated force of a grown man throwing himself against it. While the glass held, the frame failed, leading to the tragic fall. News of Gary's death spread quickly throughout the city. People couldn't comprehend how such a thing could happen. Gary wasn't reckless or trying to harm himself. He repeated something he had done many times before. Yet this time it led to his untimely death. Gary's colleagues were devastated. Hugh Kelly, another lawyer at the firm, described Gary as a brilliant lawyer and a kind person who would be deeply missed. The tragedy shook the firm, once one of the most prestigious in Canada. A crisis team was brought in to help employees cope, but the emotional toll remained evident. In the years following Gary's death, the firm began to decline. Many believe the trauma of losing Gary contributed to Holden Day Wilson's eventual downfall. By 1996, the firm had closed its doors, marking one of the biggest law firm failures in Canadian history. Gary's death became part of Toronto's history. It was so unusual that many people thought it was just an urban legend, but the facts were clear. His story was featured in media, including the film The Darwin Awards, the show 1,000 Ways to Die, and an episode of Mythbusters. Online forums even debated the event, with some questioning whether it was real. But there was no denying the truth. A man lost his life in a bizarre, tragic accident.
It was November 3rd, 2014, in Jersey City, New Jersey. Gary Anderson, a 58-year-old delivery man from Summerdale, had a routine job that day, delivering drywall to a high-rise construction site. He worked for George Hildebrandt Incorporated, a trucking company based in New York. The construction site was filled with activity as two 50-story residential towers and an attached hotel were being built on Christopher Columbus Drive. It was a typical day for Gary, but it would soon turn into a tragic one. Gary was known as a diligent worker. He had been with his company for a long time and was well regarded by his colleagues. His truck, marked with "Owned by God," was parked at the site as he prepared to deliver the sheetrock. Gary had a hard hat, but it was left in his car that morning. Around 9 a.m., Gary was standing near his truck, talking to another worker who was inside a pickup truck. Unbeknownst to Gary, high above him on the 50th floor, a construction worker was fiddling with a tape measure. The worker was preparing a wall for windows when the 1-pound tape measure became dislodged from his belt. The tape measure slipped from his hands and began its descent. The tape measure fell nearly 500 feet, gaining speed and momentum. According to City College professor Robert Alfano, by the time it reached the construction site below, It was traveling at nearly 140 miles per hour. The tape measure first struck a piece of construction equipment about 10 to 15 feet above the ground, bouncing off it before hitting Gary in the head. Gary, who was leaning into the truck window to speak with his colleague, was struck as he pulled his head out. The impact was immediate and devastating. Gary collapsed to the ground, unconscious. The scene was chaotic, as workers and bystanders rushed to his aid. An ambulance was called, and he was quickly transported to Jersey City Medical Center. Despite the efforts of the medical staff, Gary went into cardiac arrest while being treated. He was pronounced dead from his head injuries at 9:52 a.m., surrounded by his wife and daughters, who had rushed to the hospital upon hearing the news. The news of Gary's death spread quickly through the construction site and beyond. Gary's colleague, who had been speaking with him just moments before the accident, was in shock. "It's very scary," he said. "I had no idea something so small could do so much damage." Juan Bonilla, a worker at a nearby site, supported this statement. "Yeah, it's a little scary. You don't know what's going to happen," he said. Bonilla emphasized the importance of safety gear. "Absolutely. I think he would have been hurt, maybe in the hospital, but it would have probably saved his life," he said, referring to the hard hat that Gary had left in his car. A former construction worker near the site insisted on the importance of wearing a hard hat. "You don't work in this environment without a hard hat," he said. "He paid the price. You gotta have it." However, even with a hard hat, Gary's chances of surviving such an impact were slim. The speed and force at which the tape measure fell made it a lethal projectile. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration was called in to investigate the accident. Their investigation would likely focus on the circumstances that led to the tape measure falling, and whether all safety protocols were being followed at the site. OSHA's role is to ensure workplace safety and prevent such tragic accidents from happening. The construction site was temporarily shut down following the accident, and workers were sent home. The site belonged to AJD Construction, and neither the construction company nor the trucking firm, George Hildebrandt Incorporated, would comment on the incident. The development project was being undertaken by Panepinto Properties and Iron State Development, who also refrained from making any statements. Gary's death was not only a blow to his family, but also to his colleagues and the broader construction community. His colleagues remembered him as a hard-working and religious man. One worker mentioned that Gary had been telling a story and had uttered the words, "God is good," just before the accident.
1992, when Greg Austin Gingrich took a trip to the Grand Canyon with his teenage daughter. Greg was known for his sense of humor, always playing jokes and making people laugh. He and his daughter shared a close bond, built on adventure and fun. This trip seemed like just another opportunity for Greg to pull one of his classic pranks, but this time it would cost him everything. The Grand Canyon is one of the most breathtaking natural wonders in the world, attracting millions of visitors each year. But with its stunning views come serious risks. The steep cliffs and unpredictable terrain can be dangerous for those who don't take caution. Greg, however, wasn't thinking about safety when he decided to stage a stunt in front of his daughter. Standing near the edge of a guard wall, he pretended to lose his balance, flailing his arms and stumbling as if he was about to fall. The plan was to scare his daughter, then land safely on a small rock below, revealing it was all just a joke. His daughter, used to his antics, wasn't impressed. She simply walked ahead, assuming it was just another one of his pranks. But Greg had made a terrible miscalculation. The rock he intended to land on was much farther than he thought. As he slipped off the ledge, expecting to catch himself, he lost control. Instead of landing safely, he fell, plummeting nearly 400 feet. His daughter, unaware of what had just happened, kept walking, likely thinking he would come up laughing, as he always did. By the time she realized something was wrong, it was too late. Park rangers arrived at the scene, and after a search, they found Greg's body at the bottom of the canyon. What had started as a harmless joke had turned into a tragedy. Greg's daughter was left in shock. One moment she had been with her father listening to his jokes, the next he was gone. The reality of what had happened was something she would carry for the rest of her life. This wasn't the first time someone had lost their life at the Grand Canyon. Every year, around a dozen people die in accidents there. Many are due to missteps near the edge, misjudging distances, or ignoring safety warnings. The canyon's cliffs are unforgiving, and even the smallest mistake can have fatal consequences. Greg's story is a chilling example of how unpredictable nature can be. He was confident in his ability to pull off the prank, never considering that a small error could lead to disaster. He assumed he knew the terrain well enough, but nature doesn't care about confidence. It only reacts to actions. His family was left to grieve, and his daughter in particular had to live with the memory of that day. What was meant to be a simple joke turned into an event that would haunt her forever. Greg's death was not about recklessness or a lack of experience. It was a case of underestimating the danger. The Grand Canyon is beautiful, simple, but it commands respect. One misstep, one wrong move can change everything. While accidents like these are rare, they do happen. Many visitors let their guard down, caught up in the excitement of exploring such a majestic place. They take risks for the sake of thrill or fun, forgetting that nature doesn't play along. If Greg had thought twice before attempting his prank, he might have walked away from that trip with just another funny story to tell. Instead, his daughter left the Grand Canyon without her father, forever carrying the weight of that day. For those who visit places like the Grand Canyon, Greg's story is a reminder. Beauty can be deceiving, and nature is not something to take lightly. A single moment of miscalculation can change everything, and sometimes there is no second chance. It began as an ordinary Sunday in a quiet village near Heidenheim in Germany. Ludwig A., a 79-year-old man, and his wife, 80-year-old Inge, spent the first part of their day going to church. And then, it was time for their traditional Sunday roast. But the couple decided to forego this culinary tradition for a hearty vegetable stew. By the end of the day, it was clear that this seemingly innocent event would lead to an unimaginable tragedy. The couple had received zucchini from Ludwig's sister-in-law's garden, something that had become a yearly tradition by then. Alongside potatoes, onions, and turnips, the zucchini became the centerpiece of their lunch. As they ate, though, they noticed something was unusual about their stew. The dish was uncharacteristically bitter. They were accustomed to bitter taste since they grew and enjoyed radishes from their garden. But this was different. Inge chose not to finish her meal. Ludwig, however, ate his portion despite the bitterness. 2 hours later, they came to regret their decision. Both fell violently ill. Nausea and relentless vomiting gripped them, accompanied by diarrhea. Out of the two of them, though, Ludwig was faring worse. His condition rapidly worsened. His strength dwindled. And then, his face turned yellow. Alarmed, they decided it was time to seek medical help. Their family doctor promptly referred them to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed severe poisoning. The culprit, cucurbitacin, a toxic compound sometimes found in plants of the Cucurbitaceae family, including zucchini. The toxic compound is rare in cultivated vegetables, but can occasionally reappear due to cross-pollination with wild plants. Its bitter taste serves as a warning, but Ludwig and Inge had been unaware of its danger. The toxin attacked their organs with devastating effects. In Ludwig's case, his lungs became inflamed, and according to Inge, the toxin shredded his intestines. Inge, who had eaten less and vomited more frequently, began to recover. Ludwig's condition, however, spiraled downward. Inge made a full recovery and was discharged from the hospital, but Ludwig wasn't as fortunate. 3 days later, Ludwig A. passed away. Inge later reflected that her survival might have been due to her swift and severe reaction to the toxin, which expelled much of it from her system before it could do irreparable harm. His tragic death prompted investigations by health authorities and the Ellwangen Public Prosecutor's Office. The Chemical and Veterinary Investigation Office, also known as CVUA, issued an urgent warning. Vegetables such as zucchini, pumpkins, and cucumbers that taste bitter should not be consumed, as this could indicate the presence of cucurbitacin. Maria Roth, the CVUA's director, confirmed that Ludwig's death was the first recorded fatality from this toxin in zucchini. It was October 23, 2017, in the small coastal village of Kuala Sanglang, northern Malaysia. The Nine Emperor Gods Festival, a major Taoist celebration, was in full swing, and crowds gathered to witness various rituals, including one performed by Lim Ba, a famous Taoist medium. Known for his extreme physical endurance, Lim, who was 68 years old, had become a local legend through his ritual known as human steaming. In this act, he would sit inside a large metal wok and endure being steamed alive, showcasing his spiritual strength. Lim had captivated his followers with this dangerous ritual for over a decade. Many saw it as a powerful symbol of faith, and it had drawn crowds to witness Lim's perceived invulnerability. However, his family was deeply concerned. Lim had undergone heart surgery the previous year, and his health had been in decline. His son Kang Huai and daughter Wei Ling had pleaded with him to stop. He was on medication for hypertension and hadn't been feeling well leading up to the event. Despite their warnings, Lim insisted on going through with the performance. At 10 p.m., Lim took his usual position in the large wok. Sitting in a lotus pose, he clasped his hands in prayer, and a massive steel lid was placed over the top. The fire underneath began to heat the wok, and food items like corn, rice, and buns were steamed alongside him. It was both a religious ritual and entertainment to the audience as they watched the steam rise from the wok. Everything appeared normal initially, with Lim sitting calmly inside as he had done many times before. His previous record for enduring this was 75 minutes, and no one expected anything different this time. However, after 30 minutes, strange noises were heard from within the walk. What began as soft sounds soon became frantic banging. Lim, once calm, was now in distress. Panic spread through the crowd as Lim's son and others rushed to lift the lid. When the lid was finally removed, Lim was found unconscious with severe burns covering his face, hands, and body. He had gone into cardiac arrest, and although efforts were made to revive him, they were unsuccessful. Lim was pronounced dead at the scene, and the cause of death was determined to be a heart attack worsened by the burns he suffered. The news of Lim's death shocked the local community, where he had long been regarded as a spiritual leader who appeared almost invincible. However, his family had always feared this day would come. His son had expressed that they had repeatedly urged him to stop, knowing the risks, especially after his surgery. His daughter Wei Ling noted that although he cherished the admiration of his followers, the family constantly worried about his safety. Following Lim's death, the temple canceled all further performances out of respect. Taoist officials distanced themselves from the ritual, with some explaining that it wasn't part of mainstream Taoist practice, but rather a fa shu, a magic-like performance that tested physical endurance. Tan Ho Kio, president of the Federation of Taoist Associations of Malaysia, emphasized that while such feats could attract believers, they were dangerous and not recommended. Lim's death brought attention to the risks of extreme rituals. Malaysia, known for its religious diversity, has a long history of endurance-based religious acts. Still, this incident underscored the potential danger of pushing the body beyond its limits, even in the name of faith. For Lim's family, the grief was overwhelming. They had always been aware of the risks, but his devotion to his followers and belief in his spiritual strength had always outweighed their concerns. Wei Ling noted that he had been performing these rituals for so long that they never imagined it would end this way. In the end, many wondered why Lim continued the ritual despite his deteriorating health. Having undergone heart surgery and being on medication for hypertension, it was clear that his body was no longer capable of handling such extreme conditions. Nonetheless, his belief in the ritual's power and his determination to continue ultimately proved to be too much for his weakening body to endure, leading to his untimely collapse.
It was an ordinary day in Massachusetts in 2019. A 54-year-old construction worker, whose name remains unknown, was having lunch at a fast food restaurant. He had always had a sweet tooth, often indulging in various candies. But his recent obsession with black licorice turned out to be a fatal choice. This is the unsettling story of how his love for candy led to his untimely death. The construction worker had a history of poor dietary habits. His meals primarily consisted of several packages of candy daily. For years, he had a particular liking for red fruit-flavored twists. However, 3 weeks before his death, he switched to black licorice. This seemingly minor change had catastrophic consequences. Black licorice contains glyceric acid, a compound derived from licorice root. This acid can cause a significant drop in potassium levels in the body, leading to serious health issues. According to Dr. Neil Butala, a cardiologist at Massachusetts General Hospital, even a small amount of licorice can increase blood pressure. But the construction worker's consumption was far from small. He was eating a bag and a half of black licorice every day. On that day, the man was enjoying his lunch when he suddenly began to feel unwell. Witnesses reported that he gasped, started shaking violently, and then lost consciousness. Emergency responders arrived quickly and performed CPR, reviving him briefly before rushing him to the hospital. The medical team discovered that he was experiencing ventricular fibrillation, a life-threatening heart rhythm problem. Despite their best efforts, the man died 32 hours after arriving at the hospital. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine provided a detailed account of the man's condition. The study revealed that his potassium levels were dangerously low, leading to heart rhythm disturbances. This was directly linked to his excessive consumption of black licorice. Dr. Eliza R. Edelman, a physician mentioned in the study, diagnosed the man with metabolic, renal, vascular, and cardiac toxicity due to apparent mineral or corticoid excess from licorice consumption. Essentially, the glyceric acid in the licorice had caused a dangerous buildup of cortisol in his body. This, in turn, led to high blood pressure, metabolic alkalosis, fatal heart arrhythmias, and kidney failure. The man's health was already compromised before his black licorice addiction. He had been a heavy smoker, consuming a pack of cigarettes a day for 36 years. Additionally, he had a history of heroin use disorder and untreated hepatitis C. These pre-existing conditions likely made his body more vulnerable to the toxic effects of the licorice. This tragic incident is not an isolated case. In 2017, the US Food and Drug Administration issued a warning about the dangers of glycyrrhizin, the sweetening compound found in black licorice. The FDA cautioned that eating as little as 2 ounces of black licorice a day for 2 weeks could lead to heart rhythm problems, particularly for individuals over 40.
December 12, 2021, a quiet Sunday afternoon in Jaipur, India. Mohsin, a 29-year-old man from Uttar Pradesh, had been living in the city for 2 years with his partner and her young daughter. But this wasn't a typical relationship. The woman had left her husband and eloped with Mohsin, cutting ties with her past life. Since then, her husband had been searching for her, determined to find her and their child. That day, his search came to an end. The husband arrived at the apartment where Mohsin and his wife had been living. What exactly was said inside remains unclear, but the moment Mohsin saw him, he panicked. For 2 years, he had been avoiding this confrontation, and now, with nowhere to hide, he made a desperate decision. Instead of facing the situation, he ran to the balcony and jumped from the 5th floor. The fall was devastating. Mohsin landed hard, suffering critical injuries. His partner, who had witnessed everything, immediately rushed him to SMS Government Hospital, hoping he would survive, but the damage was too severe. That night, Mohsin succumbed to his injuries. The next day, his body was sent for a post-mortem examination before being handed over to his family. But the story didn't end there. In the aftermath of the tragedy, the woman and her husband disappeared. No one knew where they had gone, and authorities were unable to track them down. Their sudden vanishing only deepened the mystery surrounding the case. Investigators determined that Mohsin's reaction had been driven by fear. Rather than facing a confrontation, he had acted on impulse, making a choice that ultimately cost him his life. In the days leading up to the incident, Mohsin and the woman had moved into a new apartment near NRI Circle, hoping for a fresh start. But whatever peace they had found was short-lived. Police confirmed that the woman's husband had never stopped looking for her. When he finally found her, things took a turn no one had expected. Instead of a conversation, fear and panic took control, leading to a tragic end. Mohsin's family was left in shock. They struggled to understand why he had made such a desperate choice. Their grief was compounded by the unanswered questions surrounding his final moments. Meanwhile, authorities continued searching for the woman and her husband, but their whereabouts remained unknown. Mohsin's story is one of fear, impulsive decisions, and an unresolved mystery. His attempt to escape a difficult situation only led to devastating consequences. And with the key figures in the story now missing, the full truth may never come to light. In 2007, Sheila K. Ross and her husband Dane, seasoned truck drivers from McLeod, Oklahoma, were on a routine trip. They had traveled to Yuma, Arizona to collect supplies from a Dole plant. But what began as an ordinary evening would take a devastating turn, changing the lives of all those involved. That evening, when they arrived at the plant in Arizona, Sheila exited their truck to retrieve paperwork for their load. But when the 47-year-old woman failed to return, her husband Dane became overcome by worry. He too exited the truck and searched the premises himself, but there was no sign of his wife. Dane decided to notify the Yuma police and ask for their help. Officers conducted an extensive search but found no sign of Sheila. As hours turned into days, her disappearance remained a mystery. 3 days later, a dock worker at the Hy-Vee grocery store distribution center in Chariton, Iowa, made a grim discovery. Sheila's body was found in the back of a semi-trailer delivering lettuce. The trailer, owned by a different trucking company, had been at the same Dole plant in Yuma on the night Sheila disappeared. Authorities determined that Sheila had been pinned inside the truck during loading, and the compressive force of the pallets of lettuce caused her death. According to Dr. John Kramer, the autopsy showed Sheila was as Investigators believe Sheila was accidentally pushed into the trailer by a forklift operating in the loading area. Unnoticed by the driver, she became trapped between the heavy pallets of produce. The intense pressure left her unable to breathe. Her body remained undetected as the trailer traveled nearly 1,500 miles to Iowa. Sheila died on Tuesday, January 30, 2007. Statements from Dole confirmed the company's cooperation with law enforcement, but offered little solace to Sheila's grieving family. The lettuce in the shipment was destroyed, a minor detail in the face of such a profound loss. Sheila, remembered as a dedicated truck driver and loving wife, had worked alongside Dane for years. Married in 1980, the couple shared a son, Daniel, and a granddaughter. Her funeral service, held on February 5, 2007, brought together family and friends to honor her memory. It was July 4, 2015, in Calais, Maine, near the Canadian border. Devin Staples, a 22-year-old from Orlando, Florida, celebrated Independence Day with friends and family. Devin, who had worked as characters like Gaston and Goofy at Disney World, was known for his fun-loving personality. The usual fireworks, laughter, and drinks festered that evening. Devin, known for his sense of humor, played around with a fireworks mortar tube, unaware that a tragic mistake was about to happen. The group was lighting fireworks throughout the night. At some point, Devin picked up the fireworks mortar tube and placed it on his head. His friends, thinking he was joking, tried to convince him to stop. Within seconds, Devin lit the firework, which exploded instantly, killing him. His brother Cody was nearby and described the scene as devastating, noting that nothing could be done to save Devin. The news of Devin's death shocked everyone who knew him. His family emphasized that Devin wasn't reckless. His brother mentioned that Devin often pretended to do silly things for laughs but never intended to hurt himself. This time, however, a joke turned into a deadly accident. Devin's mother, Kathleen Staples, believes Devin thought the firework was inactive. She told CBS News that Devin assumed it didn't work and placed it on his head as part of his playful nature. But once the fuse ignited, there was no time to react. His fiancée, Kara Hawley, who was present that night, explained that Devin was likely buzzed from alcohol and might have accidentally lit the firework. She recalled yelling at Devin when she saw the fuse was lit, but it was too late. The firework was a reloadable mortar tube meant to explode into the sky. Its exact type is unknown, but its power was strong enough to kill Devin immediately. His death shows the dangers associated with fireworks, which cause many injuries and fatalities, especially around holidays like the 4th of July. Psychologists suggest that young adults like Devin are more prone to risky behavior due to peer pressure and the desire to impress others. Dr. Art Markman from the University of Texas Austin explained that the brain's frontal lobes, responsible for controlling impulses, fully develop in the mid-20s, making young adults more likely to take risks. Devin's history as a fun-loving entertainer might have contributed to his decision to place the fireworks on his head. Alcohol likely contributed to Devin's poor decision-making that night. It impairs judgment, making it harder to recognize danger. Devin might not have realized the risk of putting a live firework on his head, believing it was a harmless prank. After Devin's tragic death, his mother began advocating for stricter fireworks regulations in Maine. The state had only legalized fireworks in 2012 after a 60-year ban. Devin's death was the first fatality since fireworks became legal. Kathleen argued that fireworks should be regulated similarly to firearms or vehicles, emphasizing their potential danger. State Representative Michel Lajoie echoed her concerns, suggesting stricter rules for fireworks use, though he acknowledged that it's hard to prevent every accident. Devin's family and friends remember him as a kind, energetic person who loved to make others smile. He had planned to become a veterinary technician and start classes later that year. His love for animals and his joyful spirit are how his loved ones want him to be remembered. To honor his memory, his brother Cody encouraged people to do something nice for someone and show love in his name.
It was January 27, 2018, at Naya Hospital in Mumbai, India. Rajesh Maru, a 32-year-old man from Lalbagh, was there to help his brother-in-law's mother, Laxmi Solanki, who needed an urgent MRI scan for suspected meningitis and pneumonia. Rajesh, concerned but trusting of the hospital staff, had recently started a new job at a clothing shop in Parel and was known for his helpful nature. Rajesh was wheeling Laxmi on a stretcher with his brother-in-law, Harish Solanki. Upon reaching the MRI section, the staff instructed them to remove all metallic objects, as the powerful magnetic fields of MRI machines can turn metal objects into dangerous projectiles. However, the situation took a tragic turn when the ward boy, Vital Chavan, asked Rajesh to carry an oxygen cylinder into the MRI room. Rajesh hesitated, aware that metallic objects were not allowed near the machine. He asked if the MRI machine was turned off, but the ward boy reassured him, saying, "This is our daily work, don't worry." Trusting the staff, Rajesh carried the cylinder inside. As Rajesh entered the room, the powerful magnet of the MRI machine, still operational, pulled the metal cylinder with immense force. Rajesh, holding the cylinder, was dragged along, and his hand became trapped. The cylinder's flow meter broke, causing liquid oxygen to leak onto his face. Harish and the ward boy immediately tried to free Rajesh, but it was a struggle. Rajesh's left index finger was severed in the process. Despite their efforts, the excessive inhalation of oxygen proved fatal. Rajesh was rushed to the trauma center, but the medical team could not revive him. By the time they reached the emergency ward, he was already dead. The news of Rajesh's death shocked everyone in the hospital. His father, Galal Maru, was devastated, expressing disbelief and sorrow over the negligence that led to his son's tragic demise. The MRI room had become the scene of a horrific accident. The police quickly got involved, arresting Dr. Saurabh Landrekar, ward boy Vital Chavan, and maid Sunita Surve, charging them under Section 304A of the Indian Penal Code for causing death by negligence. The hospital administration initiated an internal investigation. A team from Philips, the MRI machine manufacturer, along with senior doctors, visited the site to remove the oxygen cylinder and Rajesh's severed finger. In the following days, the family faced additional heartache. Laxmi Solanki, the elderly woman Rajesh was helping, succumbed to her illness. The family, already mourning Rajesh's untimely death, had to cope with another loss. The Maru family's grief just gets worse with time. For Hindu families, it is essential to perform last rites for all body parts of the deceased. Rajesh's severed finger remained stuck in the MRI machine for days and was later kept at the Kalina Forensic Laboratory for nearly 18 months. The family made countless trips to the hospital and police stations, trying to retrieve the finger to perform the final rites. Finally, on June 20th, 2019, Rajesh's family received his finger from the forensic laboratory. It was an emotional day as they performed the last rites at Waukesha, cremating the finger and scattering the ashes in the water according to Hindu rituals. Rajesh's mother and other family members gathered to bid him a final farewell, hoping to find some peace after what happened. The incident shows serious lapses in hospital safety protocols. Idzis Kundan, the additional municipal commissioner for health, noted that CCTV footage revealed the negligence of the ward boy and attendant. They failed to enforce safety measures, allowing Rajesh to enter the MRI room with the oxygen cylinder. Both staff members were suspended pending further inquiries. Dr. Ramesh Barmal, the hospital superintendent, admitted to being unaware of the preliminary report's findings, but emphasized the need for a thorough investigation. The hospital's MRI machine, which was 7 years old, was out of service until it could be repaired. Patients requiring MRI scans were referred to other BMC-run hospitals. The Agripada police provided a detailed account of the incident. They confirmed that Rajesh's death was caused by excessive inhalation of oxygen. As Rajesh stood between the trolley and the MRI machine, the cylinder was sucked out of the trolley by the magnetic force, dragging Rajesh along. The police officer's statement raised questions about the trolley's material, as it should have also been affected by the magnetic field if it was metallic. The incident caught the attention of local politicians. Member of the Legislative Assembly, MLA, Mangal Prabhat Lodha, announced that Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis had agreed to provide compensation of 500,000 Indian rupees, or almost $6,000, to Rajesh's family. However, the family later claimed that the promised compensation was not paid.
2014 in Xinjiang City, China, when an ordinary accident turned into a horrific disaster. A woman visiting her husband's family had just finished using an open-pit toilet when she accidentally dropped her brand-new phone into the waste below. The phone was worth around 2,000 yuan, or about $320 at the time, and she was determined to get it back. She called her husband for help, and without hesitation, he jumped into the pit. But as soon as he landed, the toxic fumes from the sewage overwhelmed him, and he lost consciousness almost immediately. Seeing this, his mother panicked and jumped in after him, trying to pull him out, but she too was quickly overcome by the gases and collapsed. Now, with both her husband and mother-in-law trapped, the woman made a desperate decision. She climbed into the pit herself. The moment she entered, the fumes hit her, and she fainted. One by one, the family members were falling. Her father-in-law, watching in horror, tried to call for help, but in a final act of desperation, jumped in as well. Like the others, he was quickly overpowered by the toxic air and lost consciousness. At this point, the entire family was trapped inside. Neighbors heard the commotion and rushed to help. Realizing how serious the situation was, they used ropes to pull the victims out, but even some of the rescuers were affected. One neighbor fainted from the fumes. By the time all 6 people were pulled from the pit, the damage was already done. The woman's husband and mother-in-law did not survive. The others, including the woman, her father-in-law, and 2 neighbors, were in critical condition. They were immediately taken to the hospital, but the loss had already shattered the family. Authorities later determined that the victims had only been in the pit for about 5 minutes, but that was enough for the toxic gases to do irreversible harm. The realization was devastating. If help had arrived sooner, the outcome might have been different. As news spread, the community was left in shock. The woman's uncle, overwhelmed with grief, struggled to comprehend the sudden loss of 2 family members. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked. The entire neighborhood mourned the tragedy, grappling with the fact that something so simple, retrieving a phone, had led to such unimaginable consequences. In the aftermath, the incident left an eerie reminder of how dangerous confined spaces with toxic fumes can be. The phone, the object that set off the entire chain of events, was never recovered. But at that point, it no longer mattered. The real loss was the lives that had been taken too soon and the irreversible impact left on those who survived. This story is not just about an accident. It's a chilling example of how quickly things can spiral out of control. A single moment of desperation led to an unimaginable loss, leaving behind grief, unanswered questions, and a family forever changed. Lives can change in mere seconds in the most unexpected ways. It is a truth that the town of Lyshevo, nestled near the Volga River in Russia's Tatarstan Republic, came to understand on a fateful day in 2013. It began with a simple household task that spiraled into a catastrophic loss, leaving a young girl as the sole survivor of her family. It all started when Mikhail Chelishev, a 42-year-old law professor at Kazan Federal University, descended into the family's cellar. It was supposed to be a simple, routine task. But unbeknownst to Mikhail, the potatoes stored in the cellar had rotted, releasing what was a foul odor, and even more importantly, a deadly gas. Glycoalkaloids, naturally occurring toxic compounds in potatoes, had accumulated to lethal levels, creating a virtually undetectable trap in the small room. Soon after Mikhail entered the cellar, the noxious fumes completely overwhelmed Mikhail, and he collapsed, never to rise again. A short while later, when Mikhail failed to return, his wife Anastasia became worried. The woman, who was 38 years old, decided to follow him into the cellar, concerned for his safety. Sadly, this decision sealed her fate. She entered the cellar and was overcome by the toxic gas almost immediately. She collapsed to the floor, joining her husband in his untimely end. Their son, Georgy Chelishev, was alarmed by his parents' prolonged absence. After all, they were supposed to go into the cellar and get right back, something they'd done so many times before. Concerned, Georgy, who was only 18 years old, entered the cellar next, only to succumb to the same deadly fate. Meanwhile, Anastasia's mother, 68-year-old Iraida, became increasingly anxious. She couldn't help but feel that something was incredibly wrong with her family. She decided she needed assistance, so she called a neighbor for help. But Iraida did not wait for help to come. The older woman took the matter into her own hands and decided to act herself. Tragically, Iraida also descended into the cellar before help could arrive, sealing her fate alongside her loved ones. In a twist of fate that resembles something out of a fairy tale, the family's daughter, 8-year-old Maria Chelisheva, was the only one of her family to survive. When she reached the cellar, she saw that the door was open, which allowed the lethal gases to dissipate enough to spare the little girl. But the sight she encountered would forever haunt her. Her entire family, her father, her mother, her brother, and her grandmother, lay lifeless on the floor. It was too late. The aftermath of this tragedy left Maria orphaned and inconsolable. Maria Chelisheva was taken in by relatives, but nothing could bring her family back. Her dad, Professor Mikhail Chelishev, was honored by Kazan Federal University in a moving ceremony held in its marble hall. The devastating incident highlighted the hidden dangers of everyday foods. Potatoes, a dietary staple, can produce toxic glycoalkaloids such as solanine and chaconine, especially when stored improperly or allowed to rot. These compounds disrupt cell membranes and affect the nervous system, causing symptoms like weakness, confusion, and in severe cases, death. Exposure to light, age, and physical damage significantly increase glycoalkaloid levels, concentrating the toxins just beneath the skin. While rare, poisoning from potatoes can have fatal consequences, as this tragedy so painfully demonstrated.
It was September 23, 2017, at the Plas Talgarth holiday complex near Machynlleth, Wales. Elizabeth Isherwood, a 60-year-old former policewoman from Wolverhampton, arrived for a week-long stay. This trip was a last visit to the timeshare her family had recently sold. But Elizabeth, known as Mary to friends and family, would never return home. Elizabeth was fit and active, enjoying golf, caring for her grandchildren, and meeting new people through her job as a carer. She had been a policewoman, a teacher, and even worked for the post office before moving to New Zealand and later returning to the UK. This trip was meant to be a peaceful retreat, but it ended in tragedy. On the first night, Elizabeth got up to use the bathroom in her ensuite. She accidentally walked into the airing cupboard, mistaking it for the bathroom. The door handle malfunctioned, trapping her inside. Naked and disoriented, she struggled for hours to free herself. Elizabeth used all her strength to escape. She broke a pipe and used it to try to break through the walls. Unfortunately, the water sprayed from the broken pipe, soaking her and speeding up hypothermia. Despite her struggle, her body temperature dropped dangerously low. Throughout the night and the next day, Elizabeth continued trying to escape. She clawed through brickwork and plaster, making significant progress. She managed to create a hole large enough to climb through, but didn't realize it was blocked by a picture screwed to the other side of the wall. Her cries for help went unheard, or were mistaken for maintenance work by other guests. A neighboring couple heard the banging and considered reporting it if it continued after 5 p.m. Sadly, Elizabeth's efforts ceased just after 5 p.m., leading them to believe it was maintenance workers finishing for the day. Exhausted and drenched, she eventually succumbed to hypothermia. Elizabeth's body was discovered a week later, on the day she was due to check out. Staff found her during an investigation into a water leak. Her clothes and suitcase were untouched, indicating she had never even unpacked. The inquest into her death ruled it as misadventure, concluding she died of hypothermia after becoming trapped. Elizabeth's son Craig and her ex-husband Clive were devastated by the news. They had to inform Elizabeth's grandchildren, Molly and Poppy, of the tragic circumstances. Craig described the conversation as the worst possible one a father could have with his children. The family was left shattered by the loss. Craig decided to take legal action against McDonald Resorts, the owners of the Plas Talgarth complex. He believed the company was negligent in failing to properly maintain the door handle. Craig, represented by Adam Wilson from FBC Manby Bowdler, sought compensation not for money, but to prevent any other family from experiencing a similar tragedy. Adam Wilson stated that the central issue was whether the company was negligent in maintaining the property. He emphasized the horrific nature of the tragedy and the distress Elizabeth must have endured trying to free herself. The legal action aimed to secure compensation for Elizabeth's injuries and the loss of care she provided to her grandchildren. More importantly, it sought to hold the company accountable and prevent future incidents. Craig pointed out that the case wasn't about financial compensation. No amount of money could replace his mother. It was about acknowledging the mistake and preventing future negligence. Elizabeth had been a vibrant and active individual, with many years of happiness ahead of her. Her death was a senseless and avoidable tragedy, one that Craig hoped would lead to changes in how such properties were maintained. Elizabeth Isherwood led a remarkable life. She lived in New Zealand with her partner Rosie before returning to the UK. She took up a part-time job as a carer, which she loved because it allowed her to meet new people and stay active. Her relationship with her ex-husband, Clive, remained good despite their separation almost 30 years ago. They had met in the police force and stayed friends even after Elizabeth came out as gay. Their final meeting for a drink before her trip to Plas Talgarth shows their enduring friendship. Clive and Craig described Elizabeth as a sporty, fit, and healthy woman who adored her grandchildren. The inquest into Elizabeth's death revealed the harrowing details of her final hours. It showed how she fought tirelessly to escape, using a broken pipe to claw through the plasterboard. The constant water spray and her lack of clothing led to the rapid onset of hypothermia, ultimately causing her death. The public's reaction to the case was one of shock and sympathy. Elizabeth's tragic death highlighted the importance of proper maintenance and safety measures in holiday resorts. Many questioned how such a preventable accident could have occurred and expressed support for Craig's legal action.
It was July 2019 in Erzurum, Turkey. 24-year-old Zafer Kuzu had recently been convicted of causing harm to another person. Instead of prison, he was sentenced to community service, something that, while inconvenient, wasn't a severe punishment. But for Zafer, even this was too much. Determined to escape it, he came up with a reckless plan, one that would ultimately cost him his life. Zafer didn't want to complete his sentence. Instead, he convinced himself that if he were injured badly enough, he could avoid it altogether. His idea? To stage an accident that would send him to the hospital. It wasn't a well-thought-out plan, but it was one he was willing to go through with. He wasn't alone. Two of his friends, an 18-year-old known as FY FY and another friend called FYT agreed to help. The plan was simple but dangerous. Zephyr would strap 2 pillows to his back to soften the impact, and one of his friends would shoot him with a shotgun at close range. The hope was that the blast would leave him injured, just enough to land him in a hospital bed, but not enough to cause real harm. But things did not go as planned. A shotgun doesn't fire a single bullet. It shoots multiple pellets at once, spreading out as they travel. Even with pillows as makeshift protection, Zephyr was putting himself in serious danger. When FY pulled the trigger, the force of the blast tore through the fabric, completely bypassing the so-called padding. The impact was devastating. Zephyr collapsed in pain. His friends, realizing the situation had gone horribly wrong, panicked. They rushed to help him, trying to get him medical attention, but it was too late. Before they could even leave the house, Zephyr had succumbed to his injuries. Authorities were called to the scene shortly after. When police arrived, they detained both friends. FY, the one who fired the shotgun, was immediately arrested, while FYT was taken into custody for questioning. The shotgun was seized, and Zephyr's body was sent to a forensic institute in Istanbul for an autopsy. During the investigation, details of the bizarre plan emerged. It became clear that Zephyr had believed this was a way out of his punishment. Instead, his attempt to escape responsibility had led to an irreversible outcome. In court, FY faced legal consequences for his role in the incident. He was charged and placed in custody while proceedings took place. Meanwhile, FYT was released on bail, but remained under investigation. Zephyr's story left many in shock. It was hard to understand why he would go to such extreme lengths to avoid something as minor as community service. His decision to stage an injury had not only failed, but had taken his life in the process. For his two friends, the reality of what had happened weighed heavily. What had started as a foolish plan had turned into something far more serious. They now had to live with the knowledge that their involvement had contributed to a tragic loss. Zephyr's death was an unfortunate reminder that reckless decisions can have permanent consequences. He had sought a way out, but instead he had created a situation with no way back. His story, though unusual, serves as an example of how desperation can push people to make choices that lead to disaster. 4th, 2012, at the Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium. 2-year-old Maddox Lamar Durkosh was visiting the zoo with his parents, Jason and Elizabeth. The family stopped at the African painted dog exhibit, a popular attraction featuring a raised viewing platform where visitors could look down into the enclosure. While designed to provide a good view, this platform had risks, especially for small children. Wanting Maddox to see the animals better, Elizabeth lifted him onto the 4-foot-high railing. Despite posted warnings about safety, it was common for parents to hold their kids up for a better look. As she held him, Maddox lost his balance and slipped from her grasp. He fell 14 feet, missing the safety net below, which was only meant to catch small objects, not a child. He landed in the middle of the enclosure, right among the 11 wild dogs. The situation turned horrific almost instantly. The animals reacted to Maddox's fall, and despite zoo staff responding quickly, they were unable to reach him in time. A police officer fired a shot at one of the dogs in an attempt to stop the attack, but it was too late. Maddox had suffered fatal injuries. A veterinarian on the scene confirmed that there was nothing that could be done. The incident left everyone in shock. The exhibit was immediately closed, and the zoo contained the remaining animals. In the aftermath, the Durkosh family was devastated, and the tragedy sparked both legal and emotional battles. Elizabeth faced harsh criticism for lifting Maddox onto the railing, but authorities ultimately decided not to press charges. Allegheny County District Attorney Stephen A. Zappala Jr. ruled the event as a tragic accident. Still, the family pursued legal action against the zoo, arguing that it had failed to address safety concerns. Documents revealed that the zoo had known about the dangers of the exhibit since at least 2006. Staff had previously observed parents holding children over the railing, raising concerns that an accident could happen. However, no changes had been made. Despite this, the Pittsburgh Zoo insisted that the exhibit met all required safety standards and had passed 35 federal inspections since it opened. Public opinion was divided. Some blamed the zoo for not taking action after repeated safety warnings, while others argued that Maddox's mother should have been more cautious. The case was eventually settled out of court, with the terms remaining confidential. Following the tragedy, the zoo made changes. The viewing platform where Maddox had fallen was removed, and the African painted dogs were relocated to other facilities. The exhibit was later replaced with a new one featuring cheetahs, but criticism remained, particularly regarding how the zoo handled the situation. Many felt it unfairly placed the blame on Elizabeth, who was already grieving the loss of her child. Despite their grief, Maddox's parents found a way to honor his memory. Since he loved toy trucks, the family started a donation drive, collecting toy trucks to give to children in need during the holiday season. The initiative touched many hearts, and thousands of people from across the country participated, ensuring that Maddox's love for trucks lived on in a meaningful way. While nothing could undo the tragedy, the incident led to broader discussions about safety in public spaces. It also raised difficult questions about responsibility, whether institutions like zoos should do more to prevent accidents, and how families navigate the unthinkable loss of a child. Maddox's story is one of immense sorrow, but his family has worked to keep his memory alive. Through their efforts, they not only bring joy to other children, but also remind others of the importance of safety, awareness, and the lasting impact of a single moment.